The Knicks got embarrassed in Utah, and it was not fun. But what has this team really shown us so far this year? We're talking about it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. And also, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Knicks daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. I also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you keep hitting that auto download function or the notification bell so you never miss an episode, because we are here for you guys 5, if not sometimes more, days per week. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at strick.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And we are today, unfortunately, going over a early evening defeat to the Utah Jazz on Saturday. Gavin, 121-106. The Knicks lost, and we're going to get more into that in a minute. But more importantly, maybe right at this second, you brought this up before we started recording. What has this team really shown us so far this year? Unfortunately, this is another loss to a team that they probably should have beaten, and a consistent theme has sort of popped up here, which might come to bite them, especially in the in-season tournament when they run up against the Orlando Magic here within about a week. But they're having a really hard time with running young teams, and I think that this has shown its head a few times, but also some other issues have shown up with this team, and it's led to sort of a point here where the Knicks haven't really had a good game against a good team yet this year. At least as this season has progressed, we now know certain teams are not good. Like beating the Sixers isn't really worth much at this particular moment. And it clearly wasn't worth very much in that moment either. But yeah, I don't know. What has or hasn't this team shown us so far this year?
Yeah, this is something I was thinking about coming out of the Jazz game. And look, even if the Knicks had beat Utah by 30, we could have had this same segment and been like, all right, well, we still haven't seen anything. They haven't beaten anyone great. But you mentioned it, not a single win this season against the team that's currently over 500. The Miami Heat are at exactly 500 after beating the Dallas Mavericks in overtime tonight. But I think what this game drove home to me and why I'm getting a little existential in a negative way here is like they're just so contingent on their offense being great. And granted, like I think it's a pretty reasonable expectation that their offense is going to be great most nights. But I think back to that January stretch last year where they had this incredible consistency because they were overwhelmingly good in that defense built around OG Anunoby, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Josh Hart, and Dante DiVincenzo, and Deuce McBride filling in on the margins. And you hear it every year during March Madness broadcasts. They're like, hey, defense travels. Defense is what gives you consistency. And it's a little bit of like a classic, like old coach basketball cliche, but it's true. Like there's nothing stopping you from playing dominant defense every single night. We see it from the Oklahoma City Thunder. We see it maybe to a slightly lesser extent from the Boston Celtics. We saw it from our Knicks most of last year. And I think it's what allowed them to survive all their injuries. It's what allowed them to be like the most dominant month in basketball with the Celtics last January. And they don't have that kind of calling card. Their calling card is that they are an incredible offensive team, that they are second in the NBA in effective field goal percentage so far this year. And they were coming off like a 2-game stretch. Like the Knicks had this great graphic at the start of the game. It was like arguably the best 2-game offensive stretch in team history. It's like the first time since 88 that they scored 130 in back-to-back games. It was the first time they've had 3 straight games with 30 assists since 1994. First time in franchise history they had 2 straight games shooting 50, 40, 90. But even when you're a great shooting team, shooting is a little bit fleeting. And the shots were not falling against the Jazz. And the Knicks all of a sudden were very capable of losing to one of the worst teams in the NBA. Like they're look, and there's, you have to caveat that the Jazz are in the West, so it looks a little bit worse. They've been competitive lately against good teams. They have solid talent. They're really well coached. I will give you all that, but like when I zoom out and look at this, like the Knicks haven't shown us that this like philosophy or this style of play works against the best teams in the league. And of course, there's still a bunch of different ways they can improve. I don't think their offense is close to hitting its ceiling yet. They don't have Precious Achua. They don't have Mitchell Robinson. So there's a lot of reason to think that all these things are going to get better. But just looking at where they're at today, right now, this isn't a team that I would expect to get to the conference finals. I don't know if this is a team that I would be like sure is going to get out of the first round of the playoffs. I would favor them. I'm not sure, just because there's that inconsistency night to night.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point, the one thing that you consistently see can be shut down in the playoffs when things clamp up a little more is a team that's too reliant on the three ball.
Well,
And
not the Celtics, but I guess mortal teams that don't play defense. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I mean that's true. But I mean, yeah, the Celtics are reliant on it insofar as like they just have put together such a good shooting group, but like they're able to still get inside if they have to,
Yeah,
and stuff like
for
that,
sure.
which team I don't think is necessarily proven
Hmm.
yet. I think that we've seen like just by virtue of the lack of free throws that they're drawing so far this year, like even in this game against the Jazz, who like the one thing you should be able to do if you need to make a comeback against a young bad team is get them into free throw situations, get them to foul you, try to trick them. And I feel like we just saw so little of some of the old bag of tricks. Like I feel like, Brunson was not trying to get inside as much to, attempt to bait guys into fouls and, whatever. Some people want to like throw a hissy fit about the way that Brunson generates free throw opportunities, but he plays the game and, like he's done really good at that. And we saw so little of that in this game in particular. To zoom it out to just in general, I think if I wanted to look at it through an optimistic lens, I think the offense comes a lot quicker than defense in this league, and I think that we've kind of seen that in some years with this team. I mean, it feels like a million years ago, but even just last season, like Mitchell Robinson went down, and the Knicks were like playing really well on defense before he went down, and then he goes down. Isaiah Hartenstein joins the starting lineup, and I remember you and I were even like kind of optimistic about that at the time, being like, oh, well, this is why you get that depth. Like he looked really good last year. I don't think they should miss a beat. They should be okay. And then they were just hemorrhaging points for like 7 or 8 games in a row after that. And they were like the worst defense in basketball for a stretch. And this was with a group of guys that had all still been together for the last year and change before Mitch got hurt, because iHeart was there the year before. And yet, just having a shift in your personnel and everything else is just very damaging to a defense. And so I think that maybe has something to do with it. It also doesn't help that, they're, and I mean, we could talk about this more in the game recap itself, but they're playing a style that, they were trying in some ways to draw fouls in this game. And yet the way that they're going about it, which is just, especially Cat, I don't want to like pick on him because he's been so good on offense and like literally won the Knicks some games this year just by virtue of being so good. But I mean, there were times in this game against the Jazz, and it's been a consistent theme where he's selling out so hard to get a foul call that he then falls over, and then all of a sudden the only guy that can credibly defend the rim on the other side is on the ground, and the other team gets a 5-on-4 for a number of seconds, usually long enough to get that transition opportunity off, and either shoot a 3 and make that, which we saw plenty of in this Jazz game, or just get inside and attack a defense that is without a rim protector on the inside. So I guess that's also sort of the downside of having your center be one of your offensive hubs, is that normally one of the pluses of having like a Mitchell Robinson out there is that he's going to try to get the offensive rebound or whatever, but he's also, once it becomes clear he's not getting that, he's one of the first guys running down the floor to try to defend the paint. Same thing happens with Precious Achua and stuff like that. So, there are things where I can look at it and, like you said, make the excuse of, well, they don't have 2 of their best interior defenders right now, and that's going to hurt them a lot, I think. They're still going through growing pains with new players, and they haven't had Deuce McBride the last few games too, which definitely hurts their bench defense quite a bit, even though Campaign has been playing really well on that end. But it's still worth being concerned about and talking about, even if we ultimately think they'll probably make things better. Right now, to your point, like for a team that went all in with the idea of potentially being a finals contender this year, or at least, a team that can make the Eastern Conference Finals or something. It's looking a little shaky at the moment. Like, and if things don't improve with the defense and they can't start taking care of business against like a team like the Jazz, which is a team that they should have just, if this was last year, they would have just rolled the Jazz, because that's what they did over and over and over last year, except for I think the game on the road at the Jazz, which was the sticking point with that whole, like, how many teams did they beat that were under 500 or whatever, because the Jazz kept like being above or below 500 and the Knicks had lost to them at one point. So like, they're not like the worst team in the world, but I still would have liked to have seen them come out a lot stronger against this team. And it is enough to start making me think, like, if they run up against a team that's like, if the Pacers, for example, figure things out on their end and Tyrese Halliburton starts playing better and whatever, that's a team that would scare me a little bit as a Knicks fan right at this moment, because they play just good enough defense to stymie what the Knicks want to do sometimes. And yet they're like a really good 3-point shooting team, as we saw in that second game against them this year already. If you keep leaving them open from three, they're going to burn you. And, that's not something that the Knicks want to run into at any point this year. So anyway, long-winded way of saying I'm worried, but still, I'm trying to stay even keel. But it's just, games like this make you feel like, man, this team should be really embarrassed for this. And this is not a game I expected them to lose, even at this early juncture of the season.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more in just a sec. But you look at where they made their run in this game, and it was Jericho Sims. He was a plus 19. He was on the court for the entirety of that 17-0 burst that got it from 77-58 to 77-75. He doesn't play the entire fourth quarter. Now, is it reasonable to ask Tom Thibodeau to bench Karl-Anthony Towns for Jericho Sims? Probably not. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns has been like a top, I don't know, 5 offensive player in the league so far this season. Like, he's earned the right to close these games out. Personally, I would have tried them together, just given like how revolutionary just having like competent rim protection and Jericho Sims seemed to be, and having him as an offensive rebounder on the other end of the floor seemed to be really helpful. We haven't gotten a lot of that this year. We are going to get some version of it, I think, more immediately with Precious Achiuwa and Towns, and then presumably they're going to test some minutes with Mitchell Robinson and Towns, unless they just trade Mitch before he's even healthy. But it's something that they're going to have to take a look at and see if it's their better option, because the defense, it is just hard for me to contemplate that they are going to defend well enough with Towns at center. And by the same token, you can just say like, all right, but then is like the ceiling of this team like a slightly better version of last year's team? Like, when the whole point of getting Towns is so you can have this offense that like the Knicks haven't had since they didn't have advanced stats in the 70s, but I'm assuming since the 70s. I don't know. There's a lot to figure out. We're going to try to do some of it next on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we got to let you know about our friends over at SKIMS. And I'll tell you what, when we first got this ad opportunity and everything, they did offer to send us a little bit of SKIMS underwear. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that they like carried men's underwear, if I'm being completely honest. And then they sent them. And I was like, well, let me, get a little variety here. So I know I like the stretchy type materials from my other underwears. And I was like, all right, well, let me try 2 different cuts. So I got the 5-inch and the 3-inch. And the 5-inch is more like what I've always gotten. It rides, about mid-thigh, whatever. And they were pretty comfy. And I was kind of skeptical. I got the 3-inch and I was like, I don't know how this is going to fit. Is this going to look like tighty whities or whatever? And it didn't. It fits really nice. I was very impressed with how those fit. They're actually my favorite pair of underwear now. They're very soft. They're very breathable. They're very like active, friendly. If you're going out and playing basketball in them or whatever, don't run into the issues I do with my 5-inch underwear sometimes, where they ride up a little bit and then you're sitting there like trying to adjust your underwear under your shorts, whatever, while you're trying to play basketball. So I don't know, consider me a fan, and consider me a fan in general of SKIMS. They've been very comfortable. And the one pair of underwear that as soon as my laundry's done, I'm always going for is the first one to pull out of the laundry, and then being sad till I can't wear them again till the next time I do laundry. So anyway, if you want to get some for yourself, shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com/lockedonnba. Let them know we sent you. So after you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. That's very important. Tell them that Alex loves how SKIMS feel or whatever, especially if you get those 3-inch ones. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, SKIMS just launched their biggest holiday shop ever Also available at skims.com/lockedonnba. All right, Gavin, we're back in to keep talking through this loss and just the overall merits of the Knicks right now. But maybe we should zero in on this actual game itself, because I do think that it identified one of those problems that we've been seeing, which is the lack of transition defense against teams that want to run a lot. And I already alluded to it, and we were talking about it before we started recording a little bit, but like Cat and to a lesser degree Brunson, these guys are trying so hard in their own way to like sell out for contact by going so hard at the hoop that they're consistently like falling over. And if they don't get the foul call there, they're essentially setting up their defense to be tilted against a fast team, because a team like the Jazz, who are just a bunch of young dudes that are trying to prove themselves in the NBA, are just going to start sprinting down the other end and attempt to get a dunk or a 3-pointer, or just even layup, whatever. They're going to try to take advantage of the fact that you have one less defender back there. And we saw it pay off for them in the sense that they had a really good game shooting from three. Like, despite not getting up the most attempts you'd ever see, they put up 34 threes in this game. They made 19 of them for 56%. And I didn't go through and watch every single one of them again to confirm this, but it felt like at least half of those were in transition, like just getting down there, getting that 4-on-5 situation, making one or two passes, and then just finding the guy in the corner. And, a lot of time it was, it felt like every time to me, for whatever reason, there was Johnny Juzang. Like, he hit 4 of 7, but, also Colin Sexton was hitting them on the wings. Like, Lauri Markkanen was sitting in the corner for a number of them. He went 5 of 8. Like, these guys just torched the Knicks in transition that way. And that can't keep happening. Like, I think that we saw the same thing happen against the Rockets, where it was like another team that was like young, fast, wanted to get out and go. And the Knicks just seem to have a real problem with these type of teams, because if the whistle isn't going their way on one end and they have like a Cat or a Brunson, falling over down there and creating an advantage that way, then these teams have no compunction about just running. They're like, well, we don't care. I don't hear no whistle. So like, I'm going to get down there and go, put up a layup or whatever. And just, you're not going to be able to do anything about it because you're a man short. And then the Knicks just find themselves, we sort of saw that happen in this game, where they chopped and chopped and chopped away at this lead, and then managed to get, to, what was it, within 2 at one point? I think was the best
77-75.
Right. So like, managed to get it within 2 points, and then the Jazz just go on another little run because the Knicks just weren't playing good transition defense, and all in all just not playing good defense around the perimeter. And then they fell back in the hole again and just kind of were never able to get back out. But these sort of younger teams like this, now granted, it works out in a way that a lot of the best teams are older and are going to play a more methodical style, kind of like the Knicks. So the teams that should, at the end of the year, like, I still have faith that the Knicks will be, a team that's going to end up in the top half or so of the playoff picture. Even if things go really poorly, I can't really see them getting worse than like the 5 seed or something this year. But like, they're going to potentially run into some teams in the playoffs even that look like this, if they run into like the Magic, or if they run into the Pacers or something like that. But even along the way, if they're going to let these younger teams that play fast beat them like this, it takes away one of their biggest strengths from last year, which was being able to beat up on young teams and get those easy wins and never not take care of business along the way. And so far, I think we're already seeing them sort of not do that this year, which is a little concerning from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the defensive thing, right? Like, if you have a great defense, like, you could have great consistency against bad teams. If you have great depth, you're going to have great consistency against bad teams. If a couple guys are shooting poorly, all right, bring in new guys. They're fresh. They're going to guard. They're going to shoot the ball well. And of course, like, we have to caveat all this with, like, Mitch is out, Precious is out. I said both of them earlier. I didn't say Deuce McBride is out. And like, maybe it's easy to forget that right now, because Cam Payne is doing a darn freaking good Deuce McBride impression, both in terms of his shooting and his passing is even better than what we usually see from Deuce. And his defense has been really good. So it's easy to forget that. But Deuce is someone who, of course, could like make a difference, bring some energy, because right now, like, the biggest thing I see, and it's part of the reason that Cam Payne stands out in such a dramatic way. Like if I were to describe like the vibe in one word of this Jazz game, and again, like it's coming off a Suns game where they looked like amazing in this respect and had like amazing energy and were like making a ton of plays on defense. Like this was just like total lethargy after getting like what they had Thursday, Friday off coming into this one, and they looked like they were playing a back-to-back. Like it was very similar to the Bulls game, and I kind of get the same impression I got during the Bulls game that the Knicks thought like, all right, like we can sleepwalk as much as we want, and we're gonna like just start making threes, and we're gonna come back and win this game. And like that is just not the reality of the NBA right now. The league is too deep. There's too much talent. Like right at the beginning of this one, they got down 22-9, and then they made a big run and made it 24-22. We said it earlier, 77-58, big run, 77-75. Like the Knicks showed like when they played with intensity, and like specifically when they had just a lick of rim protection with Jericho Simpson, like they didn't even need Karl-Anthony Towns offense. Like they had more than enough to like get out in transition and make plays. Like during that big 17-0 run, it was partially Sims rim protection. It was also like Campaign had two different strips. Like OG had like a steal and went for a dunk. In the earlier run, Mikal had a steal and I'm pretty sure turned it into a dunk. Like they were playmaking defensively. And this is a team right now that you just don't really feel consistently on either end of the floor. There are times on offense, particularly that Suns game, but honestly the last couple of games, where they have played really downhill, where they've gotten that pick and roll game going, and you do feel them. And like Towns' offensive rebounding is a way you feel this team. Defensively, the nights where like they've like made affected the other team with their physicality have been few and far between. They're 28th right now in forced turnovers. And some people would push back and say, all right, but Tom Thibodeau teams never really forced turnovers. They were 13th in forced turnovers last year, and that was without Mikal Bridges, who's like nominally someone who should be like, he hasn't consistently been on the Nets, but should be amongst the best in the NBA at doing that. And just out of curiosity, I looked at the other teams that were down near the bottom. The Jazz, the Bulls, the Suns are 27th, the Pistons are 26th, the Spurs are 25th, the Bucks are 24th, the Nuggets are 23rd, the Raptors are 22nd, the Wizards are 21st, the Hornets are 21, the Pelicans are 19th. I say that to say, like, there are not a lot of good teams in there, right? Like, I think the Suns and Nuggets are the only two outside of the Knicks that are over 500. Maybe the Spurs are. I got to double check that. But this should be a team that can compensate at times for their lack of rim protection with their defensive playmaking. And we're just not seeing that consistently. And that was sort of the promise of having Hart, having Anunoby, and having Bridges together. And it's not happening right now. And when Towns has a game like this, where like it's so weird because I don't think it's ever an effort thing for him, but he just has these games where he is just like utterly absent as a rim deterrent. And he has games where he looks like sort of okay as a rim deterrent, but this was not that. Like I was writing it down every single time, like whether it was like Lowry Markkanen driving to the rim or Colin Sexton just like putting an elbow into him and finishing, like he just does not, or at least in this game, did not affect the other team at the basket. Like it was having like a mannequin out there. I mean, like when he tried to jump, it was like he wasn't even there. Like Lowry just kind of scoffed at him, went right around him, like either that or he was in help and he was like jumping at the point that the opponent was just like already finishing. Is just a slow jumper, is slow to react. Very similar to Julius Randle, honestly, which sucks to say because I've been talking about how different those two are. So I'll shut up. I know this is a little bit of a long rant, but I say all this to say like there are just a lot of reasons to be frustrated with this defense. And on the nights they shoot 60% from three, we just don't notice as much because they're up by 20 anyways.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the next thing we have to talk about, unfortunately, is the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson had really off games in this one, and that sort of was in and of itself just enough to kill the Knicks. And maybe that's also, if you want to look at it from an optimistic perspective, a reason enough to say, well, hey, look at how poorly they shot. They still managed to almost make a comeback here, and then it fell short. So let's talk about that in just a moment. We'll talk about the Knicks' reliance on their two superstars and kind of what it means overall for them right now.
But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. That the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Like if I was looking at that Giants-Bucks line, there might have been a point mid-game where the Bucks went up, I don't know, what was it, 21-0? I said, you know what, I think the Giants are going to make a little bit of a run here. I would have been dead wrong, but that's my right as an American to go and do that. It wouldn't have happened for me. But you know what? If I went the other way and I said, hey, the Bucks are looking good, I think this is going to keep up. Well, I might have made some money. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And we want to let you know about our friends over at Game Time as well. And I want to tell you guys about my favorite feature lately, which is Game Time Picks. Filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I've been using that feature lately. I'm going to be in Dallas for Thanksgiving, and I'm going to be going to the Knicks Mavs game. I'm already resolute on that, but I don't have tickets yet because I'm the type that always thinks there's going to be a better deal opening up. And that's why I've been using Game Time Picks, because they're only showing me the best deals. And the best part is they show me all in pricing, which allows you to see the total up front with all the fees included and everything else. So you're never blindsided by fees when you go to check out at the end. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, Gavin. So the Knicks were definitely harmed in this game by, well, okay, I don't want to just put it on Brunson and Towns. Mikal Bridges had another really just awful offensive game in this one. So let's give him a little bit of this too. We'll call them the big three in this one, because even though OG has been, I think, soundly outplaying Mikal Bridges so far this year, I think that the assumption was that Brunson, Towns, and Bridges were sort of the offensive hub of this team coming into this year. And what OG's been doing has been far and away a surprise. But I'll shout him out real quick too. I mean, he shot 10 of 19 in this game, 7 of 12 from 3, had a team high 27 points, 3 boards, 3 steals, 2 blocks. Just awesome game for OG. He did everything he could. But unfortunately, the Knicks did not get nearly that production out of Brunson, Bridges, or Towns. Little quick math here. They shot combined 17 of, let's see, 38, 4, of 53. That's really bad. I mean, they could not get anything to go. Brunson was the high water mark, shooting 42%, but only shot 2 of 9 from 3. Bridges shot 3 of 15, 1 of 7 from 3. Towns shot 6 of 19, 1 of 9 from 3. I'm going to be honest. I couldn't really, there wasn't anything that really jumped out to me in this one of this is why they didn't do well. Other than maybe they were, I mentioned the free throws and the fact that they didn't draw a ton. There were a few of those where I kind of looked at it and said, oh, I think he got kind of hacked there. Probably should have gotten a free throw call. And yet, 3 sets of free throws or whatever was not going to change the outcome of this game. Ultimately, they wound up losing by 15 in the end. I think this game just sort of underscored, and this to bring it full circle, I guess, just how little margin for error there is for the Knicks in having a bad offensive game right now. Because if they do, if the top guys aren't scoring the ball, they just straight up can't. I mean, maybe you could say that for any team, but sometimes last year and in previous years, they had games where they shot as a team, they shoot in this one, 39% from the field, 33% from 3. We've seen times where the Knicks in the last couple of years have overcome numbers like that and still won the game just by sheer force of will because they have that defense. But this game to me just sort of underscored, for whatever reason, these guys were off. And that basically meant this was almost a guaranteed loss as a result, because if those 3 guys can't be scoring, then the Knicks are going to be in trouble at various points this year. So, again, I don't really think that it was anything that the Jazz were doing special on defense to really bother them, but it was just disconcerting to see all 3 guys have a bad game like that, and just how the Knicks just have no way of overcoming that right now.
Yeah. And again, that's what happens when you go from a team that before the Towns trade maybe would fully healthy would have had the best depth in the NBA, and you lose that depth trading a 2-for-1, and then you have 3 injuries to the 3 most important guys off your bench, and that depth is gone. Your margin for error is gone, and it hasn't been an issue because Towns, this is the first dismal shooting game he's had. I know he's had nights where he hasn't been as hot, but he's been super consistent. Brunson has lost a little consistency from last year, and I wonder if it has to do with like the new officiating and like the officials letting more go. And to your point, we'll see if that changes. Though last year it was the opposite, where it got like much harsher the second half of the year, and they were letting less go. But Brunson was on such a heater for most of the second half of last year that it didn't even matter because he was just shooting the hell out of the basketball. And I think when he can't get 10 free throws, like again, some of that like inherent consistency goes away. To your point, I think he can do a little bit more to force the issue. He has not shot well from floater range this year, which is a major outlier for him in terms of his career. If that starts falling again, I do think some of that consistency will come back. But I think for now, like he's fallen a little bit too in love with the three. And granted, coming off a Suns game where he made everything, like it makes sense that he was going to test that again. Like I don't really mind him taking a ton of threes. I don't mind Cat taking a ton of threes. I don't mind Bridges taking a ton of threes in a vacuum. But when all three of them are missing, you need to see them go do something else. And Towns like tried to do that in one play, and I think he got hard a layup on a little bit of a dump off, and then it just didn't really come again. And part of it was the Jazz's size, right? Like they had Walker Kessler, 7'2", great shot blocker, Larry Markkinen at 7 feet, John Collins, like 6'9", nominally like your small forward or your power forward in that lineup. Like they're a big team, and that certainly was effective in deterring the Knicks. The last thing I'll say on this is Mikal Bridges, like it would just be nice to have one game where he steps up and carries this team. Granted, like I think he's been playing pretty well lately, and like he's been playing some of his best basketball lately, so I don't want to over fixate on one, but it feels like he rides the tide a little bit. Like when everything's going well and like he's getting the ball with an advantage, he can leverage that. But in a game where like everything's going wrong, like ideally the guy you gave up 5 first-round picks for, and I know that's not fair to bring up because he didn't say I want to be traded for 5 first-round picks, but the reality is the Knicks did it. Like ideally the guy you gave up that much draft equity for and went quote unquote all in for could like come up with a 30-point game, could get to the line for 8 free throws, and could lift you up. And he's like done that at times for the Nets over the last year and a half. So outside the fact that his jumper is still a mess and like his lower body now is like all over the place at times, it's tough to see him like not able to get to the rim unless an advantage is created for him. So I think the Knicks just need a little bit more from Mikal Bridges. Like he was kind of the guy that was looking to step up because Cat offensively, like he's done his part this year. Brunson over his time on the Knicks has done his part. Like Mikal needs to earn his stripes a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And honestly, I was also about to pivot to Mikal again because, I was going to mention, despite what I was saying about, Cat and Brunson sort of costing the Knicks in transition with their attempts to draw fouls falling flat and then falling over and whatever. I mean, unfortunately, Mikal just managed to set another new high watermark for free throw futility here, in the fact that he has now gone 5 straight games since his last drawn free throw, which is insane.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for me with him, that like, I'm like, look, bro, I know you're not James Harden or whatever. Like you're not Trae Young, you're not Jalen Brunson, like you're not going to go out there and make that your whole identity. But there's something to be said. Like he's a good free throw shooter over the course of his career. I mean, so far this year, we have no idea what he's even shooting from free throw range because he's only taken 11 attempts. He's 7 of 11, but it's like you can't glean anything from that. But traditionally, he's been an 80-something% free throw shooter, if not closer to like 85%. So why is he not trying to do that? Like he averaged 4 free throws per game, or like 3.8 or something like that last year with the Nets. And I understand it was a different role, different team, whatever, but that was on a team during a year where he allegedly, I mean, so we thought, and so he sort of alluded to and everything, didn't really care. Like, so in a year where he was mailing it in, he was averaging 4 free throw attempts per game. I don't fully understand how he is just so afraid of contact and of getting all the way to the hoop this year, but like it's something that's got to change soon. And maybe it's, if you asked him and he gave him truth serum, maybe the answer is actually just like, well, I feel like I'm too indispensable in transition or whatever, like transition defense, to potentially put myself in the situation where like I would be the one falling over on a shot attempt, and then I would be the one that isn't able to get back on defense or whatever. But that's what you have guys like OG Anunoby for, and that's what you have Josh Hart for. Like, I know that he would be important to get back on in transition D, but I have no doubt that he would get himself up quickly and get back as soon as he could, maybe force a steal or something to an unassuming defense. But like, he's got to at least try to get some free throws here. That's the biggest thing for me. Like, he's playing just very, I mean, every other guy on the team you can see, like even Brunson and Cat in this game to a degree, when the three stops falling, they have extra things to try. And for Mikal, it's like the three stops falling, and then it's just, well, I'm just going to shoot middies all day. And it's like that just doesn't quite work because you're not playing good, efficient NBA basketball at that point. Like, at a certain point, he's not going to be shooting 60% from there anymore. And it's going to regress back to the mean. And even if he's shooting like 45% from two or whatever in the mid range, that's still not great when he could be potentially getting, 85% on free throws, which are way better. That's a way better return on investment for, the 2-point attempt there.
Yeah,
So,
or at the rim, right? Where like
right.
he shot 70% in his career. I just pulled the numbers up. Like, in terms of rim frequency from his this is a trend at this point. From his second year in the NBA, he went from 45% of his shots at the rim, 33% of his shots at the rim, 30%, 25%, and then 20 in that 20 games on the Nets, 23% last year, 15% this year. He went second year, he was 87th percentile among swings in rim attempts. This year, he is third percentile among swings in rim attempts. Like, that's what's inexcusable for you, right? Like, whether like he gets to the line or not, ultimately, like, he has to try to get to the rim, and he's not right now.
Exactly. So I guess that's the macabre note to end on. I don't really have anything else to add on this one, but like, for as much, I guess my overall takeaway after this game is Brunson and Cat had an off game. Ultimately, them not getting foul calls and whatever, and not being able to get back on transition defense hurt the Knicks. But like, the guy that I'm most concerned with on the overall right now is Mikal Bridges, and it has less to do with his 3-point shot, because I know that comes and goes for every player game to game, and he's been in general trending better lately. Although, as you said, I do kind of agree that he sort of rolls with the tide a little too much. When the team is doing really well, it seems to really buoy him, and when they're not doing as well as a team, he doesn't really have it in him to like drag them back up. At least not from what we've seen so far. But the biggest and most concerning thing to me is just the fact that he seems allergic to getting all the way to the rim, and it's something that he's actually good at and should be doing more. And just those numbers you just brought up are really concerning, in the sense that like, this just sort of seems like the apex of him doing it less and less and less. And hopefully that's not something that we see continue throughout this year, because I think that's one of those things that is going to need to get better if the Knicks want to themselves get better and, find a way to find ways to not lose games like this again this season, where there was a chance to win this game and they just weren't able to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Final shout outs, campaign, last 6 games now, 22 minutes, 12 points, 4 assists, 2 rebounds, 50% from the field, 50% from three. He's been really, really better than I thought he would be defensively. And again, during that run, like, it was his playmaking that got them going and shooting the heck out of the basketball. Hope it continues. Pacom Dadier, another game where I don't get the point of throwing him out there for 3 minutes. Like, just don't play him at that point. But he played great defense, stonewalling Colin Sexton on one play, stonewalling him on another play where Sexton got so frustrated he just tried to push off and got called for an offensive foul. Lost Lauri Markkanen once off the ball and gave up a 3. So maybe that's what Tibbs is concerned about. I don't know. I would play the guy. He plays good defense. He plays with effort. And I think this team could just honestly, like, even if it's not perfect, use like an injection of like youthful exuberance and a guy out there who like knows his role is not shooting and just to do everything else. Like, I'd like to see more Pacom. Shout out Jericho Sims. Shout out Tyler Kolek. Not that he played great, but like did some good stuff, hitting a 3, forcing some turnovers. And yeah, that's all we got. This was way too much time to spend on a really crappy game. We appreciate you guys doing it with us, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Locked On Knicks.